Hello, you're listening to the Lamptey Show. My name is Joey. This week I'm joined by Paul. Paul banging about with his laptop. Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear
mate,
me?
You're right, yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah, I've just introduced you, Paul. Say hello to the people that are listening.
Both of them.
Yeah, you addressed them by name.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
How are you?
And delighted to say that we've got Dom for the whole show today.
Hello there.
This is quite a good week, wasn't it? What were your moments? Paul, you start us off.
It was the moment when, after the Portsmouth game, where you realised that the title's there for the first time in my entire life.
Yeah.
The title is ours for the taking, and I ran a little poll on Twitter, and the people are still like, "Oh, we're just aiming for the top two. Let's aim for balls to that. Aim for the title." I mean, I bet that's what the players are talking about now. That can be the only thing going through their minds. They've got 18 games to win a league title, which might not come. Some of them might play in the Prem, but the chance to win a league title might not come to some of these players ever again. I think they've got to take it because it's theirs. I mean, they've got the games in hand. They're on an amazing run of form. They're all playing extremely well. The
strength and depth.
Strength and depth. I mean, Portsmouth, the people behind us against Portsmouth kept going, "Oh, these are shit. Portsmouth are shit." They're not a bad side. They're clearly not their run of form is what Portsmouth do. They just do it. They're different to us. They're very different in their style of play and their approach to Cov. One thing they're not is shit. They're a good side. And they played in a system to basically stop us doing what we do best, and they did it brilliantly. And it was an interesting game of football because you had two contrasting styles of play, but ultimately we had enough quality to win against a very good Portsmouth side who don't lose very often, and that's the marker of not only we on an amazing run of form, we're actually beating decent teams in that run of form, and we're finding ways to win. So yesterday, the moment of the week is the fact that it's there. The title is there to be won by us. There's about 5 teams, probably 9 teams looking for promotion or looking for the top 6. There's probably 4 or 5 who generally could win the title, and we're in prime position. I know we're not top, but with the games we've got, most of the hard teams are at home. The away teams, apart from Ipswich, the away teams are pretty winnable. It's there. It's completely there, and I think you've got to embrace that because it's nothing to be scared of. It's not like a relegation battle. This is completely different. This is definitely there for us to take.
In a strange way, for the home games, you'd almost prefer to have teams nearer the top of the table because they are less likely to sit back and try and make us break them down. And secondly, it's an opportunity to take points off them, isn't it?
Well, that's the thing. If we keep this run of form, our home form in inverted commas and that bollocks, our home form is brilliant. It just is. We've lost once at home, and we're winning games. We occasionally draw, but out of the remaining 8 games, if we win 5 of them and draw the other 3, our home record will be probably the best it's been in my lifetime. So it's there. It's completely there. And as you said, there's even going through simple things like last couple of seasons. Who's Player of the Year? Oh, it's this, but there's about 6 players up for Player of the Year. There's 5 or 6 players who are just constantly playing 7 or 8 out of 10 at the moment, who are just playing really, really well. And against Birmingham City, the same 5 or 6 players completely stepped up and showed what they're about. And you're doing this week in, week out, but you've stepped up against Birmingham and you've proven twice against Birmingham with a better team. With a bit of fortune, we'd have won both of those games. Obviously, if you win the first one, you don't need to win the second one. But we were the better side, and it's just. But then to take it into the league games, okay, Fleetwood game wasn't that great, but again, we didn't come out of that with a defeat. We draw games we're not playing that well in, or we're finding ways through. And I think you've got to embrace it. We're playing really well with some really good players, and we're third in the table with 3 games in hand on the team that's second, and a game in hand on the team that's top. And on Saturday, we're going to the team that's second bottom.
Well, I mean, they're bottom, really, aren't they, Southend? They're the team that have done the worst. Bolton happen to have had a points deduction that's taken them below them, but Southend have only, curiously, we've only lost 3 games all season. They've only won 3 games all season, haven't they? So, they're a wretched team, aren't they? You'd imagine that should be fairly straightforward, and I don't want to jinx it, but they're bad, aren't they? Dom, go on.
Sorry. No, I think we've also got to go away from this. Like, we might jinx it. We're third in the table. We're on a rising run of form. You've got to go into that game expecting to win.
Yeah.
I think the whole mentality of everyone involved with the Cuddle Club is Southend are there to be beaten.
You sound like someone has repitched Neil's voice this week compared to what you're normally like.
But it's not. People sort of, you're miserable. It's like, it's not hard. Give me a good football side which win lots of games, which play really well with lots of good players. I'm happy. I know it's taken me 35 years, whatever, for me to finally come across this, but that's where we're at. We're a damn good football side with really, really good players playing really, really well. What's not to enjoy about that?
You know you're damaging your own brand here, don't you, Paul?
I can handle that.
This is commercial suicide for you.
Yeah, I'll just take out non-disclosure stuff on YouTube, so you don't pass this information on. We'll keep this secret.
And you must be delighted as well that Bakayoko's now back in the team after all of the work that you've been doing behind the scenes.
I'm just as happy that Godden scored an absolute screamer yesterday. I don't care who's playing well, as you well know, but it is quite pleasing. I mean, yesterday we had the other moment of the week probably is we had a watermark in something completely new. So unpassable to Bakayoko that was nowhere near him, and no one slagged off Bakayoko for not getting near it. It was like, you're not slagging off Bakayoko for something that wasn't his fault. Who are you people? Why are you not moaning at him? Because he's playing really well.
Dom, can I get a ruling off you on Paul's use of the word screamer for Godden's goal last night? How do you feel about
that? I feel there's sort of a more subtle word to use it. Sort of, it's like a dink. I feel like a screamer is more emphatic.
Yeah, I think certainly more powerful. But each to his own. Dom, what was your moment of the week?
I'm going to go right back to the Birmingham game, which hopefully is still within the purview of this podcast.
Of course.
It was just being in a away end and just what a difference that makes on sort of the attitude of the fans. It was sort of like a similar number of fans to which we have at home, but just everyone sort of condensed and just also sort of being put in that role of being the away fans where we were the noisy lot, we were, doing all these sort of quite silly chants really, and then you go back to being in the home end of the same stadium and it's just a completely different aspect. You sort of just realise there's a bit of a pageantry about it as well, sort of everyone sort of playing roles, and even though it's the same stadium, it can just make such a difference just where you're allotted to be, and just how much of an impact that can have on how people sort of act during a game.
Yeah, as a sort of social study, it's really unusual, isn't it, I suppose? But yeah. What a thoughtful moment of the week. That's probably the most thoughtful moment of the week we've ever had on this. It's not somebody saying that somebody did a fart on the pitch or whatever it is that we would normally do. It was very nice indeed. For me, I watched the game in Wetherspoons on my iPad last night after I finished work, and when we scored, I really lost it and really celebrated really heavily. If you at a game you celebrate, at home you kind of, everyone's different, aren't they? But at home or in the pub or whatever, your tendency to kind of just sort of celebrate inwardly a little bit and be very pleased. But what was interesting about last night was I realised how many times I've sort of outwardly, like thinking about Portsmouth away earlier in the season when we equalised, and Wow, was it Peterborough where we took the lead in the very late on? But it's not even very late on, but sort of 70th minute, and that felt like a very significant thing, even though they pegged us back. There's just been so many times this season where we've either scored late goals or have done something out of the ordinary to swing the game back in our favour, where we would normally do the opposite. And it's just felt like there's been. I think we were a bit mealy mouthed about the League Two season because it never really felt like it took off. And we kind of got promoted without ever really, bar the very, very end of it, playing particularly well. But if you look back at this season, it has. If we won the league this season, you'd look back at it and think, yeah, that did feel a little bit like the sort of team that might have won the league. Do you know what I mean? It feels a lot more legit. Does that make sense?
You're complete. I mean, this is you got to remember the playoffs. The season we went out of League Two. I think we got in the playoffs, the penultimate game.
Yeah.
And we still needed a result to get into the playoffs. And you never really felt...
And what a result that was.
Oh, God, yeah. Barnet fans are still... yeah. But, as you say, there were still parts of that team that never really... It never really sort of clicked. Was, you had Tom Bayliss on the right wing in a sort of...
Yeah.
That's not really his role. It was sort of a cobbled together team that sort of got enough points to get into the playoffs. And once they got into the playoffs, obviously, I was discussing with Tom Bayliss, they wanted to beat that Notts County side. And, I think if they'd have had a different side in the semis, the semi-finals, it might have been slightly different. But because they got Notts County and they found they had something to prove, that really helped. And by the time you get to Wembley, then, it was quite an even game, wasn't it, until Willis scored that goal. This season, it's just grown week in, week out, where we're just getting better and better and better. But basically, that change to the three at the back, which I still believe we haven't lost while playing, and almost like, this season again, sort of seen a bit of a cobbled formation where, you didn't expect us to play 3-4-2-1 at any point, but they've got the players. It's a system that suits the players. Yeah, it probably happened by happenstance that we sort of landed on our feet with that formation. But then you look at the squad we've got, and the fact you've got Zane Brooke and Shippers who can start, and then you've got Callum O'Hare and Jamie Allen, who can start in the same roles, but they're slightly different ways of doing it. But all four of them have had good seasons. I mean, Alan's really coming to the fore now later on in the season. Maybe that injury sort of helped him in a way, but also he's not needed to be rushed back into the team. Even last season, we've rushed Jody Jones back in. We haven't had to make any panic sort of substitutions or panic sort of push players into the team before they're ready. It seems like quite a settled season from that point of view.
Let's get into the games themselves then. So, Dom, you're going to start us off. You went to both, but you're going to talk to us about Bolton, aren't you?
Yeah, so start off, I suppose, the only really major piece of team selection news was that Backer was starting. Godden found out was injured. So yeah, it was Backer leading line, and you're never quite sure with him whether after a good performance he's going to kick on or whether he's just sort of going to almost revert to type. But he really started that game well. For about 60 minutes before he got a bit tired. He was not only just sort of doing that typical thing he does of just sort of putting himself around and maybe chasing a few lost causes. There was a level of intelligence to his play. He was challenging for headers, and he was linking play with his touches, which is a sort of very encouraging element to see over these past three games, where you wonder whether the penny is sort of finally dropped for him, where he's just looking like a more complete player. And he was rewarded for it when Dabo intercepted the pass just around the halfway line and pushed forward, and Bakker just sort of pulled off towards the far post away from his marker and had a relatively straightforward header to put us ahead. And then from 20 minutes... Sorry.
I thought Dabo received a crossfield pass from Shipley.
Shipley.
I thought Shipley played Dabo, released Dabo for that run. I could be wrong. You could be right, but I'm pretty certain that
No, it was a
Shipley crossfield pass,
poor,
wasn't it?
it was a poor pass from like a Bolton player. And Dabo read it and managed to go straight past their left back.
You two carry on. I'm going to actually watch the goal and adjudicate on it because I can't remember either.
Okay, anyway, sorry, carry on.
But yeah, for the first 20 minutes or so, we just looked like so far ahead of Bolton. They just looked a little bit off the pace, and we were just moving the ball around really intentfully, getting to good areas. I think that was the period where Bakayoko had another goal which was disallowed for offside, which looked the right decision, and it just looked we were going to be absolutely cruising. I thought having that front three of Bakayoko, Allen and O'Hare just looked really encouraging, just like three very mobile players who wanted to play the ball quickly between them, and there was some nice sort of interplay moments, a few things which didn't quite come off. Maybe they're trying to force it a little, and maybe just haven't played quite enough football together as a unit. But I think, especially Allen and O'Hare, they can really click. I think they maybe add something a little more as part of a front three, which you don't quite get with Shipley and Westbrook in terms of sort of just having just very mobile players who can move it quickly, whereas you get something slightly different with Shipley and Westbrook, who sort of maybe take their time on the ball a little bit more and help us keep possession. So I suppose that's something we're going to have to take into consideration over the rest of the season, that there's going to be different games, and we might have to try and figure out which is the best combo for which, without ending up sacrificing sort of the minutes you need as a unit together to make something click. Whereas if you're sort of changing it, you don't know whether sort of that disrupts it. But then it seemed like the turning point of the game really was around the 20th minute, where Bolton's Dennis Politic, who just looked a really good player, I thought, he just completely beat Michael Rose, who I was watching highlights back, and he sort of tried to rugby tackle him almost, and the ref gives an advantage. He pushes onto the penalty area, does a feint, goes past McFadden, and it's quite he really should score, I think, but it's sort of quite intelligent goalkeeping for Morata, I thought, just to narrow the angle a little bit and just make that shot a little more difficult than it might have been. But from then on, the game just seemed to get quite scrappy. Don't know whether that chance sort of chastened us a little bit, or whether it sort of gave Bolton a little bit of encouragement that if they push up on us a little bit more, they can cause us problems. But from there until about the 70th minute, there was one chance that was particularly notable where Allen went clean through just after half time, but just never fancied them to score that. And a big feature of the second half was a 57-year-old or whatever, Chris O'Grady, playing on the left wing, just having an absolute stormer. He just partially, I thought Michael Rose just had quite a poor game in that regard. He just didn't seem quite up to speed. He was sort of misreading quite a lot of things and overcommitting himself, and O'Grady skinned him a couple of times. There's one that led to a header for Darryl Murphy, which is a fairly decent save for Marco Morosi. And then there was another just straight from a goal kick just after Biamri had sent a header straight into the goalkeeper's hands. Straight from that, the goal kick went straight over Rose's head, and then O'Grady is in behind. He picks out a cross, and it's an excellent finish from player I mentioned earlier, Politic, to level things, and just looked like the game had gotten away from us. We spent, particularly when Bakayoko retired, it just looked like we sort of caught between trying to play out but being pressed and not having that out ball, and we were maybe trying to force things a little bit too hard, and it just looked like the game was getting away from us. It was going to be another case of sort of a home game, a bit like the MK Dons game, where we ran out of steam and we've allowed his team sort of back into the game, and just towards the end, just when it just looked like the game had completely gone. From a throw-in, Walsh didn't need bit of skill just to carve out a little bit of space right by sort of the corner byline area, digs out a shot, the goalkeeper parries it up high, and the player winning the header is Jamie Allen, of all people, knocks it down for Max to fire home, and that's it. That's what got the job done. And I suppose it was just one of those where we've played so much football recently, and certainly in that second half, it really showed. We just looked flat out there. Surprised by Mark Robbins not making that many changes, and both in terms of from the last game and in the match. I thought that kind of game was sort of set up to bring in someone like Ryan Giles, who we haven't mentioned, who just signed, who is apparently just a super quick player. I just thought having someone like that, he can just knock the ball out to relieve pressure, would have helped. But yeah, we got the job done. It wasn't great, but it's one of those sort of 3 points which you need to dig out from time to time just to keep a promotion campaign ticking over.
I wanted to, just before we move on to Portsmouth, I wondered if you'd talk a little bit more about Jamie Allen from what you've seen in recent weeks.
Yeah, I really like what I've seen from him. He's just sort of just an incredibly industrious player. Just always seems kind of player sort of just steaming around the pitch almost, but it's sort of never quite. It's not quite headless chicken stuff. It's sort of there is intent to it. It's sort of remember in the Birmingham game we saw that with his goal against Bristol Rovers, where it was just a couple of times it was just like where he just sort of just ran in a straight line, and it just completely seemed to cut through teams, and just that tiredness is just so impressive. He sort of seems to have quite a few strings to his bow, and sort of those players you sort of kind of need at this kind of level. He'll just keep on trying, and maybe not everything he does quite comes off, but he's just gonna keep at it.
It's funny that running in straight lines sounds like a funny thing to say, doesn't it? But that's the most notable thing for me. And I'm always whinging about us not having enough players in the box, and I've just been so terribly impressed by his ability to spot just maybe a yard of space, but not just spot it, but just to run very quickly into it to allow him to get a shot away. You just think that he has a way of making it look very easy to get into the box, where I think it's just intelligence, isn't it, as opposed to anything else. I've been really impressed, but I must confess I like him for that sort of player very much anyway. Paul, what have you made of him?
Yeah, I think similar sort of thing. He's just saying this the other to Pritchard last night. We seem to have 4 or 5 really tenacious players, especially that midfield 4. They're all prepared to put their foot in. They all work extremely hard, but they've also got ability under pressure as well. And Alan's really fitted into that sort of approach of, as you say, he's quite central and he's quite direct, and he creates quite a lot of space for O'Hare to play in. And it just, when him, probably more against Portsmouth than it was against Bolton, to be honest, but the 3 of them linked up really well. And with Bakayoko playing well with his back to goal and just sort of knocking the ball off, Alan's always there or thereabouts. He's a player who makes up a lot of ground quite quickly, but so he's always an option. He's an option for the attacking players, and yeah, I think he's really settled into the team. I mean, probably the most impressive thing about his direct running was his amazing run for the goal against Bristol Rovers, where you watch that and you're like, we just haven't had a midfielder who's done that in a long time. It's very hard for a defender to track that run. And midfielders aren't tracking that run either because of where he plays. He's sort of in between the lines. And, there's goals in that player. And he had a similar run against Portsmouth Bolton and Blues, where unfortunately both times it was on his left foot and he wasn't quite as confident. He couldn't get it onto the right foot like he did against Bristol Rovers. But he's just another good attacking option, and he's someone who doesn't allow the opposition to settle. He works extremely hard, so he's just difficult to play against.
I listened to a good thing the other day of Jamie Carragher interviewing Paul Merson. I don't know if any of you have been listening to that podcast. And Paul Merson was saying about why it's much easier for an attacking player. This is going to sound like an obvious thing to say, but that I guess it's pertinent for this. Is he was saying, I don't care how good a defender you are, really, if I've got a run on you, then I've got all of the balance of probability. Like, it's really, I should be getting past you every time. But it's funny that you don't... He's quite an explosive runner, Alan, isn't he? That all of a sudden it goes from sort of nothing to a sort of very quickly darting into space. It must be very difficult to defend against someone that's going so... Not even quick, but just so past you like that. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, because the thing is, if you're a defender, you want your striker, you want to be basically matched up. Like Chris Smalling said, one of the reasons he likes playing in Italy is a lot of Italian teams still play two up front, so you've got that individual one-on-one battle. When you've got someone like Alan, who, as I said earlier, is just basically running from in between the lines, you're not sure when to track his run, but then suddenly he's there because you're not concentrating on him. So he's not an obvious person. You can't man-mark him because of the way we play, but you can't always track his runs because there might be, Bakayoko might be on your channel, so you're focusing on Bakayoko, and suddenly Alan's in the gap as well. And it's pleasing, having been worried about lack of goals, to see someone like Alan come towards the end of the season. You're thinking that guy's fresh, he's heavily involved, but also he's another player who tries to make things happen. And he's settled in. He's just, again, I think the system helps him. It helps him and Callum O'Hare in the fact that they've got that freedom. They do track back. As I said, they do work extremely hard. They do win tackles, but there's no defensive obligation for them to, they don't have to run up and down the pitch. They're not having to track like 60, 70 yards. They can be explosive in the final third. And it seems to be working for him.
Very much so. Paul, Portsmouth.
So Portsmouth is just a different beast. They're a side who kept things very tight. If they were 2 yards away from the touchline, they just headed the ball out for a throw-in. They didn't allow us the time and space to really play a game that we're used to playing. I think at half time we'd had 51 or 52% possession, which for a Cov game recently is unheard of. We dominate possession. And I think going back to the Bolton game, Bolton were quite similar. I think we only had 53% against 47 against Bolton. So we're playing against teams now who are not allowing us to get into the flow that we had been earlier. So we had to work out ways of getting around that and still finding angles and ways to break them down. And obviously key to that is Bakayoko, who is just a menace to play against at the moment. He doesn't win headers. He's forcing the opposition to head the ball into no man's land. But because of the fact that O'Hare and Allen are there, we're picking quite a few of the second balls up. He's running away from goal, but he's sort of bringing others into play. His touch is good. And there's a focal point there. And because he's playing well, it's allowing the team to play higher up the pitch and create and force more defensive problems. The issue is Portsmouth don't make that many defensive mistakes. So it could look quite a boring game, but it wasn't. It was just an interesting game of how two teams with sort of differing ways of playing try and counter each other. And in the first half, as is Cov's sort of main modus operandi at the moment, we had a couple of long-range shots, a couple of sights, but didn't really force the keeper into save. Portsmouth were the same. I got in a couple of decent positions, but didn't really have the end touch. And at half-time, I said it's not a game. It's one of those ones, if you had a tactics board and videos, you could spend hours going, what? And this guy did this run, and Dominic Hyams is fucking brilliant because he does this and this. But for a sort of audio podcast, it's not that interesting because they just cancelled each other out. Second half, Portsmouth probably had the first really good opportunity where they went down down our left. They got a good ball in. Guy got in front of McFadden and forced Morosi into a good save. And And Morosi is going for a very good spell at the moment, where he's making, as Dom said earlier, made an absolutely critical save at 1-0 up against Bolton. Go back to the Birmingham game where he made an absolutely critical save when we were 1-0 up. He's just a player who is really key to our defensive stability. He is playing really well. He's making really good shot-stopping decisions. And he's just a key cog to the way that back five functions. And in front of him, you've got McFadden, who's just, when it's those sort of games where it was a one-on-one battle at Portsmouth. They had a big striker. When they brought on, is it Harrison Reed? They brought on in the second half.
Ellis Harrison.
Yeah, Ellis Harrison. Sorry, he had a good game, and he made McFadden think, and that was that's when Portsmouth probably stepped up a little bit and looked a bit more of a threat when he was on, because he wasn't just worried about trying to win a header against McFadden. He was running in behind. He was making McFadden run a bit more. And that's when, if Portsmouth had a good spell, he was focal to that. But McFadden had a good game. I say Rose had obviously his issues against the 49-year-old O'Grady at the weekend, but he was a lot more stable. Dabo he's just a machine. I mean, that guy playing every minute in the most energetic of roles, and just him being aware, the throw-in for the goal is the amount of times you see that throwing on, but they don't take it on. It's a bit of a risk, isn't it? Throwing the ball into the centre of the park is a bit of a risk, but, that's where he's at the moment. I think he is really just stepping it up. Most weeks I see him, you look at him and you're like, that. Him, Hyam, obviously Walsh is going to play in the Championship next season. But you look at... hopefully, no. Walsh will be at Bristol City, won't he? But you look at Dabo, you look at Hyam, and potentially Rose, and you think, well, if we don't go up, their performances this season probably deserve to be playing in the Championships next season. There's going to be someone who's going to be sniffing around both of those, because it's consistent quality with those two at the moment. McCallum had probably one of his worst games recently. He didn't get in the flow. His distribution wasn't as good, but I do feel a bit sorry for him when Shipley's not there, because the only other naturally left-footed player on the pitch is Bakayoko. We don't really go... on the right-hand side, where Walsh, Dabo and O'Hare are, those three are very much a unit, and they work closely together, and it's easy for them to be outballs, and Kelly comes over to the right-hand side, and everyone, like Rose behind them, everyone's comfortable in their roles. On the left-hand side, because Hyam's not left-footed, and because we don't have a left-sided midfielder, McCallum can be a little bit in the lurch, and that can affect him at times. And then, obviously, you've got Walsh and Kelly, who are just playing... I mean, Walsh is just exceptional at the moment, isn't he? I mean, we were talking the other week about who would get in from the Mobley side. At the moment, you're struggling to see anyone getting in above Walsh. As much as Fleck was a brilliant player, as good as Winslow was that season, Walsh is absolutely just... his ability to get out of trouble, his use of his footwork and his intelligence is just... I mean, it's just clear, isn't it? I mean, the guy will be in the Championship next season. And then we had the opportunity. You were wondering where Robbins was going to go with the subs. Was he going to gamble? Was he going to go two up front? And he took off Allen, which he felt a bit unfair for him, because he was playing slightly better than O'Hare. He brought on Biamu, who really didn't get into the game at all, at any point. But he's a big guy. He does make people think. And then we brought Godden on for Bakayoko. And Godden was, again, neither of them were really involved until the goal. And as I said, it's a great throw-in from Dabo, great touch from O'Hare, to let the ball run across him, and then to pick the weight of the pass out. It's an absolutely delightful finish from Godden. And suddenly you're just like, not that we've broken them down many times. Their goalkeeper hasn't had a shot to save, but that's not against, that wasn't against the run of play. That wasn't undeserved. We weren't sure how we were going to get that goal, but it didn't seem a surprise that we got the goal. Does that make sense?
No, I know exactly what you mean. The big thing for me is that this is the first time in all of the time I've watched Cov where we aren't like gifting goals to the opposition. So we're not really badly shooting ourselves in the foot loads. That's causing us to, and that I think we're so stable at the back now that even though we didn't pummel Portsmouth or anything, if you can defend better than the opposition and then take one chance, then that's all that you need, isn't it? As opposed to fucking passing it straight to a striker who runs through and scores or whatever. Is that we're now so solid that we're getting away with these 1-0 wins, aren't we? Because as long as we take one chance, then we're okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? You got to be sort of defensively stable. And to be fair to Pompey, they missed an absolute sitter in the last minute, where the guy was earlier, Ellis Harris. What was his name, Dom?
Ellis Harrison.
Yeah, should have scored. And what made it better, if he'd left the ball completely, there was a guy free at the far post who would have had a tap in from 2 yards. So we did get away with it in the end. That was an absolutely massive opportunity. But I think if you restrict a team as good as Portsmouth to having 2 or 3 decent opportunities a game, you make your own luck, don't you? They're not going to... It's the same with us. We've had games this season where teams have stopped us, so we've only had 2 or 3 decent chances. We're in League One. We've got strikers who are League One strikers. They're not taking those chances. And it was the same against Pompey. We played brilliantly, but they did have a chance. Fortunately, they didn't take it, and we deserved the win. And as I said, it's a statement win, isn't it? We know that we've got 6 of the top 9 still to come to St Andrews this season, but we've probably beaten the best, or we've got Rotherham are probably, from what people say, are the better team. But Portsmouth with, 2 defeats in 24, 9 wins on the bounce. That's a statement. That's sort of, we can win these games. We can beat anyone who we come up against, and that's got to give us great stead going forward. So you can individually, as a team, we probably weren't as good as we've been at times, but individually, there's still enough solid, really good performances that. That's where we're at. We're a good side.
Can't you, just to make me feel better, Paul, can't you say something shit?
I mean, there's no real point, is there? I mean, this is what we've been waiting for, isn't it? And I think that's, as I said, that's what sort of gets me like, we'll be second is fine. Like, I want to win a title. I really want to win the title. We've never been like in this situation. We've got to enjoy this. There's no stress about this. There's no, I mean, it'd be shit if we ended up in the playoffs and we didn't go up. That it would be shit. But at the moment, it's so good. We're playing so well that you've got to finally aim for the stars. And the title is there to be won. The title's there for one of 5 or 6 clubs to absolutely stamp their authority all over it. And there's no reason whatsoever it can't be us. And you look over the last week, the Birmingham game, we were the better team. Okay, Bakayoko's had his goal taken off him, but Bakayoko and Biamu technically scored. We then went into the Saturday game, Biamu and Bakayoko scored. On last night, Godden scored. So that's basically the last 5 goals have all been scored by strikers. Before that, you had the Bristol Rovers game where Walsh scored an absolute screamer and Allen scored. And they're being created by different players. Sorry, Don was right. The Dabo goal I was thinking was was the first goal against Birmingham City, and Dabo's involved in goals. There's no reason to be miserable about anything at the moment, because we've been miserable because we've been shit. Let's be happy because we're actually really good, and this is pound for pound in every division we've ever been in, including that League Two season. This is probably the first time we've had a whole team where you're like, yeah, this team's good enough to win the title. Clearly good enough. And they've got the mentality's right. Robbins is getting the right decisions. Ably assisted by AD. The whole management system seems to be working. The signings. When was the last time we can't really name a bad signing we made in the summer?
No.
I know we've had question marks over...
Castaneer.
Slight question mark. Castaneer.
But even then, this is a bit part player. This isn't a guy who's played. A bad signing is where they've played 30 games and they've been wank all the way through it. Signing someone who you can afford to leave out the matchday squad isn't a big deal, really, is it?
No, and you sort of they gambled on him, didn't they? But
Yeah.
as you say, it's not like. I mean, we had question mark. There's still question marks over Godden because he has been in and out of form. But let's hope that goal goes back.
He has also scored 13 goals, something like that now.
And you also got, there's been question marks over McFadden, who has had has been at fault for quite a few goals. But
on the balance of things, comparing them to the bad players that we've signed over the recent years, it's fucking night and day.
But that's what I mean. It's sort of you're nitpicking more than sort of pointing fingers and going, that guy's a catastrophe. We don't have a real bad signing in the first team squad. So everything about it is working how you'd want it to work. Obviously, the big caveat of that is we should be in Coventry. There's no denying that this isn't perfect because of where we're at in terms of location of home games. And I know it's very difficult for some people to put that aside, but if you do put that aside, everything's working exactly how you'd want it to work, which is why I said you've got to sort of, the mentality now has got to be the title's there. We're already the biggest team in this division. We're going to take thousands to every away game now. Let's just go and win it. And then at least we can finally put that one to bed, that we don't win shit. Like, I know we've won the sort of the checker trade, but actually winning a league title, something we haven't done since 1967, that opportunity's never come around in my lifetime.
I like to imagine that what we're experiencing here is some sort of body swap comedy, and that wherever Neil is working tonight, he's telling someone about how shit everything is. He really thinks that our aim should just not be to get relegated this season. Yeah, possibly not. All right, thank you both. Right, Dom, let's do some Southend preview and let these good people get the rest of their day back.
Okay. Right, so, Southend aren't in a great situation. I was pointing out earlier, they've accrued the fewest points in the division this season. Not bottom, thanks to the saving grace of Bolton having 12 points taken off them, and also having started this season about 2 months behind everyone and taking 5-0 thrashings every week.
From everyone, wow. Not every week, yeah.
Yeah, so... It's quite strange almost that they are in this situation, given that about 12 months ago they weren't that far away from the playoffs and had a horrendous run of injuries. I'm sure some of their fans would have been thinking, well, if we get a few of these players fit for this season, maybe we can at least be mid-table, maybe push on a little bit with a little bit of luck. But just the bottom just fell out of the season very quickly. It just came from very early on. Started the season with Kevin Bond in charge of the club, and he just wasn't quite up to it as a manager. Obviously, he's sort of been an assistant manager a few different places, notably under Harry Redknapp, and it just took ages for the chairman to decide to sack him, and then it took ages for him to identify a new manager, who was Sol Campbell. And from the sounds of things, there was quite a few sort of rotten apples in the changing room, sort of quite a few players who sort of just didn't seem to want to be there and weren't quite motivated. A few quite old players as well who were maybe getting past their best at the same time, and they just sank. And they've also had issues off the pitch with the chairman quite often paying players wages late and facing winding up petitions for not paying the tax bill. So it sort of just seems like slowly and sort of what sort of come to roost this season, it's just the impact of just sort of little bits being chipped away, just sort of years of sort of poor decisions leading to an old and tired and overpaid squad, and it's sort of just fallen apart really this year. And over January they've been under a transfer embargo at Transfires, and they've had to offload 7 players just to get them close to an even kill, although they wanted to bring in a couple of free agents recently, and they're still under the transfer embargo, and Sol Campbell looks quite frustrated with that situation. They're basically playing a team of under 23 players at the moment. Quite a few gaming players do have quite a good academy. It's producing some decent players, but just so many young players playing at the same time. They weren't too bad against Peterborough on Tuesday night in a 4-0 defeat, where for about 50 or 60 minutes they were frustrating Peterborough quite well, just very set defensively. And I think that's going to be, well, the key challenge for us here is how do we play through a team who are going to set a lot of players behind the ball and try and play for set pieces. And in terms of who to look out for, I mean, not only have quite a lot of players left recently, but those senior players who are left, about half of them are injured. So it's just a completely horrendous situation. So he's set piece taker Sam Mantum. He could cause a few problems if we give away too many set pieces in dangerous areas. Sort of, that's what Sol Campbell sort of seems to be trying to base side around, just trying to get the defence organised and just trying to work on a few set piece routines, trying to nick something. That's how they beat Lincoln quite recently. So there are a team that possibly could punish us if we just completely just couldn't find a way through and just got really frustrated here. So sort of about keeping a level head and just trying to focus on wearing the team down. And the other one I look out for is their striker Charlie Kelman, who's a bit of a fox in the box. Sort of has one of the few players who's sort of really benefited from actually being allowed to play, because all the other sort of senior players have been unavailable. So he's possibly someone that might get out of this season with some credit in the bank from a Southampton perspective. So yeah, I mean, as we were talking about earlier, this is a game we really should be winning, and winning quite comfortably. And if we don't, it's definitely a big opportunity missed.
Am I right in saying they're unbeaten in the last 4 at home?
Yeah.
I'll read that somewhere.
I mean, yeah, they've had some quite decent results at home. Sort of, because they're playing sort of so many sort of players from their academy. Sort of, they are playing for pride quite well. They drew with Rotherham in December. Mentioned they beat Lincoln. They've been Accrington quite recently. So there have been some signs of improvement, but just from the tone coming out of Tuesday night's defeat, where it just seemed like that defeat in particular broke them, just in terms of a few things have reached breaking point. They're playing so many young players, they can't bring anyone in, and Sol Campbell just cut such a frustrated figure just looking through his post-match comments. So it just looks like they're at a super low ebb just generally, and the past couple of weeks where they haven't been able to do anything in the January transfer market is just taking it that bit further.
Paul, your Southend statistic there is lies, damn lies and statistics. So they have won 1 of their last 6 at home. They haven't lost in their last 4. They won their most recent game but drew 3 before that, including a 0-0 draw at home against Tranmere and a 2-2 draw against MK Dons. And a reasonably creditable home draw against Rotherham before that. But it doesn't, looking at who they've played and the results they've got, it doesn't scream, fortress so much as it does you've drawn some games.
Oh, I said I expect us to win, but just they are unbeaten in 4 at home. But yeah, I appreciate the fact that that's just the way it is, isn't it? You can play the difficult teams, or you can there's 9 really good teams, or 9 teams that are still beating for the promotion. Then there's about 4 or 5 teams who are all right, and then there's about 6 teams who are shit. You can just get the 16 or 3 of the 6 teams at home, and then the stats don't look too bad, do they? But I think I do feel a bit sorry for Sol Campbell, who sort of just seems to be going from basket case to basket case. It's just, I'm sure he's a delightful person, apart from his media persona, but I still expect us to win. And I think we've already sold over 1,000 tickets or something ridiculous. And then we've got Rochdale away, which is another, easily winnable game.
Yeah. How strange our away form?
Yeah, because we couldn't win, and then points wise, we're the third most accumulated points away from home. And I think the team that we've got 20, and I think there's two teams with 29 or something, but one of them's played like 4 games more than we have away from home. So I don't know. I said it's there, isn't it? We're there or thereabouts, top at the moment. By the end of the game on, I don't know who Rotherham have got at the weekend, but there's normally at least one of the teams in the top 6 or 7 is normally playing one of the other teams in the top 6 or 7. So we've got that gap now as well, hasn't it? It was consistently that worry that if we didn't win 2 games on the bounce, we could find ourselves 10th. Now we're 4 points into the playoffs. Yeah. So we've even built that gap away from us. The teams who, we're slightly concerned about, as I said, they've been cut. There's been a lot of teams who have fallen by the wayside. Teams like Oxford who sold their best 2 players. It's falling into place, isn't it?
It certainly seems to be. Right, are we going to leave that there then?
Might as well.
Dom, anything for you to add before we wrap things up?
No.
Good stuff. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Dom. Thank you, Paul.
It's all right.
And thank you, listener. Bye.